Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a scandal that really exposed a culture of betrayal at the absolute highest levels of competitive athletics.
We are. We're talking about the Larry Nassar scandal, which is, it's recognized as the largest sexual abuse scandal in sports history.
But for this deep dive, we aren't just focusing on the predator himself. We're looking at the decades, literally decades, of profound systemic failure that allowed it all to happen.
Exactly. The abuse of over 265 women and girls continued, totally unchecked, from 1992 to 2016.
So our source material really forces us to look past the individual monster and put the magnifying glass squarely on the institution.
That's right. USA Gymnastics, Michigan State University, and, almost unbelievably, the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
So our mission for you is to really trace that timeline of failure, pinpoint the critical moments where oversight was just deliberately abandoned.
And then understand the dramatic, legally binding reforms that were, eventually born out of this unbelievable tragedy.
Yeah. And what's so crucial to grasp here is that this whole immense failure wasn't exposed by some internal investigation.
No, not at all. Or by any legal authority, for that matter. It was a single act of immense bravery. The final unraveling, it all began in August of 2016.
With one email.
One unsolicited email. It was sent to the Indianapolis Star by Rachael Denhollander. At the time, she was a 32-year-old attorney, a mother of 3.
And she'd been following the Star's investigation into how USA Gymnastics had sort of historically mishandled other abuse claims, right?
She had. And she decided to go public.
Her complaint was incredibly specific. She stated she was molested by Dr. Larry Nassar when she was only 15, and she said it was, and I'm quoting here, under the guise of medical treatment for my back.
And she agreed to be named, to go on camera. For almost 6 months, she stood alone. She bore the entire weight of that accusation until other victims finally felt safe enough to join her.
It's an incredible story that really begins with a single, courageous voice against a monolithic system.
It truly is. And to understand how one person, Nassar, could operate with such impunity for so long, we have to look at the power structure he was in.
Right. He didn't just appear out of nowhere.
No. He joined USA Gymnastics as a trainer way back in 1986. Then he gets this powerful position, National Medical Coordinator, in 1996.
And that position gave him just unparalleled access. He treated athletes at 5 consecutive Olympic Games.
And that's where a lot of these assaults happened, under the cloak of medical authority.
And his role wasn't just in gymnastics. It was cemented at Michigan State University. He was a highly respected faculty member and team doctor there.
That dual institutional loyalty created the perfect storm. Any complaints against him were just immediately met with this fierce institutional deference.
And complaints did surface early on.
Very early. We're talking about red flags popping up as far back as 1997.
Wow.
Yeah, one lawsuit alleges that a youth gymnastics coach, John Geddert, actually failed to investigate those initial complaints.
So the warnings were there nearly 2 decades before the whole thing finally broke?
But the denial went so much deeper than just ignoring reports. There's this shocking anecdote from 2004. One of the victims actually filed a police report.
Okay, so the police were involved.
They were, but the police, they dropped the investigation.
They dropped it. Why?
After Nassar presented them with a literal PowerPoint presentation.
Wait, a PowerPoint presentation? What could he possibly say in a PowerPoint that convinces police to stop investigating a sexual assault claim?
It was masterful. In a horrifying way. He used all this medical jargon, his institutional status. He claimed his actions touching internal procedures were all legitimate, highly specialized medical treatments.
And the police, I imagine, lacked the expertise to challenge an Olympic team doctor.
Exactly. They just deferred to his authority. And that anecdote, it just perfectly illustrates how his institutional power became a weapon. It allowed the abuse to be rationalized away.
That's powerful. And USAG itself, it seems like it fostered a culture that was just designed to protect the institution above all else.
Absolutely. The sources show that between 1996 and 2006, USAG got complaints against 54 different coaches.
54.
And their pattern was to just dismiss them as hearsay, unless they came directly from a victim or a parent.
Which creates a nearly impossible barrier for a child.
A huge barrier. In fact, the former USAD president, Steve Penny, testified under oath in 2015 that as a third party, the organization had no duty to report an allegation.
They were actively creating a legal shield for themselves.
Yes. The burden was placed entirely on these vulnerable, often minor athletes.
And their vulnerability was just magnified by the environment they were training in. Let's talk about the Carly Ranch.
Ah, yes. The National Team Training Center in Texas. It was the nexus of power and fear.
The facility was run by Bella and Marta Carly, the former national team coordinators. Many victims described it as an emotionally abusive environment.
It was. I mean, Olympic-level gymnastics is already incredibly high pressure, but this place was known for strict body shaming, constant weight checks, isolation.
So what was the mechanism? How did that fear protect Nassar specifically?
It was simple, really. The fear of being cut. These young women were captive. Their entire future, their Olympic dreams, it all rested on the Carolys' approval.
So if you complain about anyone in that power structure, especially a doctor like Nassar,
You risk losing everything. The system was just engineered to silence them. And that gave Nassar total freedom to operate without any fear.
it's just a textbook case of institutional betrayal. But the failure didn't stop with the university or the sports organization. And this is where the story gets truly appalling.
This is where we get into the federal law enforcement angle.
Right. The U.S. Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General, the DOJ OIG, released these absolutely damning findings about the FBI's failure to act.
And it was during a critical 14-month window. This is really the definitive moment of federal negligence.
So what happened?
In July 2015, Stephen Penny, who was president of USA at the time, met with senior officials in the FBI Indianapolis field office. He formally reported the allegations against Nassar.
Okay, so he passed the baton to the federal government.
He did, and he gave them a thumb drive with relevant evidence.
And the FBI just dropped it. What did the DOJ OIG find? What were the fundamental errors that let the abuse keep going?
The failures were not subtle. I mean, they violated numerous FBI policies. First, they didn't even formally document that July 2015 meeting.
They treated it informally.
Completely. Second, they failed to properly document receiving the evidence, that thumb drive, and maybe the most damning part. They interviewed a gymnast who was alleging sexual assault in September 2015.
Okay.
And they didn't document that interview until February of 2017.
Wait, 17 months later?
A monumental 17-month delay.
That's unfathomable. 17 months of silence from the FBI in a child sexual assault case?
Correct.
What was the human cost of that negligence?
The DOJ OIG estimated it. During that 14-month gap from when the FBI was notified to when the case finally moved forward, Nassar just kept on treating athletes.
At MSU.
At MSU, at a high school, at a gymnastics club. And he sexually assaulted at least 70 more victims. Some estimates say it's closer to 120.
That number. That's the direct result of bureaucratic inaction.
It is a direct, tragic consequence.
And the accountability issues inside the FBI didn't stop there. The OIG report also found that officials in that Indianapolis office tried to, minimize their own errors?
Yes. The report says officials, including the special agent in charge, W.J. Abbott, provided incomplete and inaccurate information to make it appear that they had been diligent.
So they were covering up their own cover-up.
Essentially, yes. They were caught making materially false statements to the OIG.
And this gets to the core ethical question, doesn't it? Self-preservation versus public duty.
It does.
Yeah.
Because SAC Abbott, the agent in charge, was found to have been communicating with U.S. Ag President Steve Penny about a potential job.
A job
opportunity with the U.S. Olympic Committee. This was happening at the same time he was supposed to be investigating the allegations Penny's organization had brought to him.
That is an unbelievable conflict of interest.
The OIG called it a violation of FBI policy and extremely poor judgment. Abbott later falsely denied even applying for the position. It just shows that for some people in power, reputation management, maybe even their next career move was more important than justice for child victims.
So if the years leading up to 2016 were all about institutional failure, the sentencing hearing in 2018 was. It was the first real, undeniable accountability. Let's talk about the reckoning.
That sentencing hearing in January 2018, it just redefined what a victim impact statement could be. Over 7 days, 156 women and girls delivered this incredibly powerful testimony. It was called a parade of horror and catharsis.
And this included huge names: Simone Biles, Aly Raisman, Michaela Maroney, Gabby Douglas.
Right. Finally using their global platforms to speak their truth.
And Rachael Denhollander, the very first person to speak publicly, she gave the final statement. And she closed it with that haunting, profound question. I ask, how much is a little girl worth?
The judge, Rosemary Aquilina, was critical in giving those victims a voice. And her powerful condemnation of Nassar was partly driven by his own letter to the court.
He wrote the court a letter? What did it say?
It was completely unremorseful. He accused the judge of grandstanding. He claimed the media convinced them that it was wrong and bad. And then he wrote this chilling line, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned."
That arrogance, it sealed his fate.
It did. Judge Aquilina read that letter, looked right at him, and famously said, "I just signed your death warrant." She sentenced him to 40 to 175 years, an effective life sentence.
And the institutional fallout was immediate.
Immediate and far-reaching. The settlements alone show you the scale of the liability. Michigan State University settled for $500 million.
And USA Gymnastics and the USOPC.
A massive $380 million settlement.
Those numbers. They confirm the scope of the failure and the financial accountability for, what, over 500 victims in total?
That's right. And the consequences weren't just financial. MSU's president and athletic director resigned days after the sentencing.
The US Ag Board, too.
The whole board. They resigned after the U.S. Olympic Committee threatened to decertify them, and then the sponsors pulled out. AT&T, Kellogg's, Under Armour, they all severed ties.
When the reputational damage is that bad, reform becomes, well, inevitable.
And that pressure led directly to political action. Simone Biles really encapsulated it all during her Senate testimony in September 2021.
Right. She said she blamed Nassar, but also, and I'm quoting, an entire system that enabled and perpetuated his abuse.
And she called out the FBI specifically, saying they turned a blind eye to us. She asked that all future oversight be guided by Denhollander's question, how much is a little girl worth?
So the core question became, how do we stop this from ever happening again?
And the reforms all point toward this concept championed by the Gymnastics Ethics Foundation, institutional courage.
Institutional courage. What does that actually mean? How is it different from just, compliance?
It's defined as an institution's commitment to seek the truth and engage in moral action, even when it's painful, despite the risk, despite the short-term cost to your reputation.
So it's a compass oriented to the common good.
Exactly. It means you accept collective responsibility instead of deflecting blame.
And what are the key principles for putting that into practice?
It's about moving beyond just checking boxes. You have to create trauma-informed reporting policies, conduct real leadership education on abuse, and this is critical, build a culture that cherishes whistleblowers instead of punishing them.
And that idea of moral duty was finally written into U.S. law?
It was, through the Protecting Young Victims from Sexual Abuse and Safe Sport Authorization Act of 2017. This was the direct legislative response to the Nassar failure.
And that act mandated the creation of the U.S. Center for Safe Sport.
Right, in 2017. And this is the crucial independent entity. It removes that massive conflict of interest that plagued US Ag and MSU.
So the Center for Safe Sport has the authority to resolve abuse and misconduct reports for all 11 million people in the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic movement. It takes jurisdiction away from the individual sports bodies.
Correct, and that exclusive jurisdiction is key. It means sexual misconduct allegations are investigated by a non-conflicted body that can impose sanctions up to a lifetime ban.
Something the local organizations often refuse to do.
Precisely. They also develop and enforce standardized policies, like the Minor Athlete Abuse Prevention Policies, or MAPP. They govern everything from electronic communication to travel rules, creating these legally required safety boundaries that just didn't exist before.
So to sum up this deep dive, we've traced a scandal of just shocking scale, enabled by institutional complicity at every level imaginable. The university, the national governing body, all the way up to the FBI.
And it was the courage of the victims that forced these historic settlements and reforms, culminating in the Safe Sport Center as this necessary legal bulwark.
But the final provocative thought this raises for you, learner, it goes back to that FBI failure. We saw officials giving incomplete and inaccurate information to protect themselves. We saw one official looking for a job with the very organization he was supposed to be investigating.
So the question is this. In a culture that so often values self-preservation above all else, can legislation alone truly force institutions to choose courage and accountability over just protecting their own reputation? That really is the challenge in making sure safe sport stays effective moving forward.